first story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil right.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Riff Worship Podcast. Join with me, as always, are the two craziest sumbitches I've ever met in my entire life. We've got insane Austin Paulson from Sugar Grove. We have Austin Paulson from Sugar Grove, Illinois. Justin Swindle, come Louisville, Kentucky. How you guys doing?
I'm doing great. How about you, Austin?
Insane. Apparently,
it's Captain Insano shows no moisey. It has been weeks since we've done one of these. Absolutely weeks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We weren't just here.
Nope.
Last week.
Not at all. So before we dive into everything, I do want to kind of address something. You know, in our episode on Oathbreaker, we made a mention of a certain animal that is kind of known amongst the three of us. And to no context, I have a dog, and I have an English bulldog of many dogs, and he is 80 pounds and 8 years old at this point. And I did not have him fixed. Small animals are in fear.
80,
and hopefully
80
we
pounds. That's 80 pounds of ball bag right there, dude.
Well, it's got to counter leverage it. You know, he's all front heavy, so keeps him from flipping over himself.
Imagine if you're a groundhog and you just happen to like pop up while he's walking by.
Two black eyes. We'll insert a photo somewhere in here of this animal.
Not the ball bag. I promise it won't be the ball bag.
No. I'm so thankful that the folks from Oathbreaker really enjoyed the episode, but they had to sit through the first portion of that episode of just a ball joke for 5 minutes straight.
I did at least hear from one person in particular who said that they like appreciated it and enjoyed it, but the entire time I was editing it, it was like people are gonna have to sit through 5 minutes of dog ball jokes, like
Dillbald. I just want to say, much like some time ago, I was surprised that Dylan was the first person to go on a political rant on our show. I'm surprised that I'm the first person to go off on a rant about Dylan's dog's testicles on our show.
It should have been Cody.
His knees, man.
If anyone deserves the floor for that, it's our good friend Cody.
It's like y'all know those clacker toys when
yes,
we were
exactly.
kids?
It's just like
it's
those.
Like his balls going around Cody's shins.
Let's start this fucking episode.
So this ain't a job for balls, but it's a job for a cowboy.
Oh,
so I'm gonna bulldoze right through this. So
just like your dog through Cody's leg.
This is the first.
Sorry.
I don't even know where I was at with this. So this week, I was thinking about this as we were setting up to record this episode. This is the second episode we've done on a band.
Yeah, technically, yes.
Yep, because we had an interview with Nick from Job For A Cowboy.
Yeah.
Earlier this year, we had a great conversation about depression and what's the
Good
word?
song
What's that?
By Black Flag. That's a good Black Flag song.
Good depression and
like nostalgia.
But this is a different era of that band. Obviously, there's been many years in between this album and the newest album, Moon Healer, which is fantastic, by the way. But we're talking about the band's debut record on Metal Blade Records, Genesis from 2007. Really interesting time in the metal and hardcore and extreme music world. I think at this point in time, it's when, the internet was really starting to kind of get a boom. This band is a really good representation of that. So it was a whole new world. But my question to you guys would be, what was the first what was your first introduction to this band? I know Swindle and I are a little bit older, so we've probably got a very similar introduction to this band.
I don't think I really quite ever latched on to this band until recently with the release of Moonhealer, just because, I don't know. I knew people in high school talked about this band.
Right.
They were still like putting records out and stuff, but never really was a thing that I ever tried to get into. I don't know if I necessarily like avoided it or anything or had like opinions on it. I just heard of the name, like, oh, that's kind of goofy, whatever, moved on. And then come to find years later, like, you know, the band putting out their first album in what, like 12 years, and it's
10, right around there. Yeah.
Crazy record. I loved that record. But yeah, I guess I could probably firmly say I never really had a relationship with this band. Only just heard the name, might have heard a track, but it never had like a lasting impression on me.
I heard about them as they were existing. Like, I was in my first band was like a fucking metalcore breakdown band, and some people in that band listened to like the Doom EP, and I have this CD from like, I don't know when I bought it, like 2008, 2009, something like that.
What was that? What was the name of that band?
Forward to Nowhere.
Hell yeah.
Which is a reference to a misheard lyric from the Doom EP, actually.
There it is.
Yeah.
Big fan.
If Wyatt is listening to this, he's probably like third hand embarrassed.
Good.
We all need it. I think I heard of this band through MySpace, which you're going to hear a lot of on this episode. We're going to talk about that a little bit.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. He was everybody's friend. You know, he loved everyone. Not like that Zuckerberg fella. But
he's just like Bono.
World's biggest turd, from what I've gathered. But I think I heard about this band through MySpace, and then I had LimeWire, like a lot of us did during this period of time, and I downloaded as much shit as I could, and I actually got the demo first, and then got the Doom EP throughout that. And this was prior to the Doom EP getting a lot of circulation through, like, you know, record stores and entertainment stores and whatnot. And I just downloaded it. This would probably been early 06 at this point. So I was 16, really starting to get into death metal. And I just really enjoyed it. Like, it didn't sound too far off from maybe the metalcore I'd been listening to, but it seemed slightly more aggressive. This was in a world prior to quote unquote deathcore being a thing, at least in a big subject. I mean, you had bands like All Shall Perish that were around at this point in time. You had other bands that are slipping me at this point as well that were doing a really good job of creating. I mean, Dying Fetus, you could consider deathcore in certain aspects of it. There's some things with Suffocation that involve this, but nothing really sounded like the Doom EP. It was new, it was fresh. There was a vocal approach that a lot of younger kids weren't really used to hearing. But if you've listened to brutal death metal throughout the years, it's there. And I'm talking about the kind of the pig squeal vocal or the brie vocal, that sort of thing. Despised Icon. That would be a band that I didn't mention that needs to be brought up. But you had that vocal styling that was very prominent. And you also had YouTube, which was in its infancy at this point. And the Intubina Machine video came out. And, you know, that was a pretty hyped up track for this time period. I mean, early YouTube was pretty fucking crazy.
Flawless. I literally stole music videos and put them on my own fucking account like they were mine.
I mean, I can think of like, oh God, the Rack 'em Willie videos or the Power Thirst videos and different things along. Yeah. Along those lines, Newgrounds and shit like that. E-Bombs World.
Do y'all remember when there used to be a 10-minute limit on videos you could upload to YouTube?
Wow, yeah.
I watched movies like that where you just had to watch it in
10-minute increments.
Oh my God.
There'd be Yeah, 9 parts to a movie.
I think I've certainly brought it up before, but I had like for a long time documentaries on bands, like Megadeth's Behind the Music or whatever. I would like download like MP4 and put them on my iPod video, but it would all be in parts. So I would like just take up so much space. All right, part 1, part 3.
But that's how I watch the CKY videos as well. All the original CKY like skate videos. I watched all of those on YouTube at one point in just 9-minute blocks.
God.
And that has shaped me to this day. There is not there's not a doorstop that I walk by now and I don't go, bam.
My favorite noise band.
Just a plate of doorstops. But yeah, so it seems like we all have differing kind of first times with this band. I know with my ear and the type of music I'm into, this band was a huge deal to me because one, the guys were really young. You know, they were 15, 16, 17 years old when the Doom EP album came out. And seeing that as like a weird, you know, outsider kind of kid in 2006 that's into extreme music and going, okay, this can be done. And this band's a really good representation of like DIY for a lot of reasons. But you know, let's kind of get into the band's background a little bit here. The band formed in 2003 out of Glendale, Arizona, which isn't a hotbed for a ton of bands. I mean, there's been members of larger bands that have ended up living there. I know Megadeth was kind of associated with that area during a period of time. Soulfly. There's a great grind band called Landmine Marathon that kind of gets forgotten about that's from this area as well. But you also have great modern day death metal bands from there, like Gatecreeper in particular, like are fantastic. And their album this year is just crazy. But they all formed, the band formed in 2003, a bunch of high school friends, guys that all kind of knew each other from the music scene, and they all felt a connection there. It formed as vocalist Johnny Davey. Ravi, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pronounce your last name because I do not want to disrespect you. Andrew Arcurio on guitar, Chad Staples on bass, and Andy Rydstrom on drums. And if I remember correctly in the research I've done, Johnny and Ravi met in high school. They went to the same high school, apparently. Johnny's a year older than Ravi, so they met at around 16 and 15. And they both kind of just went, okay, this is a kindred spirit. This guy's into what I'm into. Like, let's do it. Johnny had a interesting upbringing. His mom was a single parent, you know, had a couple boyfriends throughout the years. And like those boyfriends would introduce Johnny to different forms of music like Pantera, Metallica. There's even a great little side note there where one of the guys that was around at the time was in a band or maybe was in Flotsam and Jetsam with Jason Newsted,
Arizona
which is
band. Yeah.
fucking wild to think about. So like he got into all these other bands throughout that. And like Ravi with his own tie-in grew up listening to like Ride the Lightning and Injustice for All. So, you know, kind of all somehow gets back to Metallica weirdly with this band.
I wonder what the band is that like is the connector between what they wrote and what they like what got them to deathcore from Metallica.
You know, who knows? Because what I read is like the guys just kept kind of getting into more aggressive music. They just kept finding things. And I'm sure like hearing bands of the time, right? This is 2003-ish. So like metalcore was getting really big at this point in time. You also had really heavy hardcore bands coming out, like Disembodied would be one. I mean, that's an older band, but bands like Disembodied, Martyr AD, early Lamb of God, Shadows Fall, you know, the things we've talked about in the past, like all those bands are going to come out. Chimera, which we've mentioned a couple times, but you look at that and maybe like Dying Fetus, Suffocation, all those bands, the brutal bands, right? I mean, there's some great technical death metal coming from the West Coast, and maybe that all kind of culminated with this. But it seems like they did what maybe we did, which is, oh, well, I've heard this. What's heavier? What's quote unquote heavier? What can I find? But yeah, again, you know, younger guys got together, started writing music. Played a few shows around there. Obviously, they're underage, so they can't get into the clubs and bar scenes. So they start playing DIY shows and art galleries and probably VFW halls. And they ended up playing with a lot of like hardcore bands and things adjacent. So, which is great. I think we're all really familiar with that, right? We all kind of came from that world. I know some of my first shows, I was 14, 15 years old, playing with different bands, and we rented out essentially a VFW hall, but it was an old fire station that we booked a show at. Like, great. We were playing covers most of the set too, which was fucking wild. But we did that. We did it ourselves, and it was a great accomplishment. I think we had 200 people in it, which was wild in a tiny little shithole town in Arkansas. Shout out David Wilson for putting all that shit together. But he's been waiting.
He's been listening to this podcast, waiting for the shout out.
He won't listen to this episode. I guarantee it. He'll listen to any of the older stuff we'll do, but he will not listen to this one. But too young to play the clubs, too young to do that, but they were able to still play shows around the area that they were living in. I don't think Arizona at that point in time was a hotbed for a lot of underground shows, but I could be wrong.
Just hot.
Yeah, just hot. Yeah, fuck. They created a MySpace page. They used a tool of the times. I'm really dating us back then because Swindle and I definitely had one. Austin, I know we've talked about it.
100%.
You caught the tail end of that though.
Yeah, I had one. Yeah.
How many Megadeth backgrounds did you have on yours?
At least a few. I know I was big on Iron Maiden at the time. I had like Aces High was my big track, and I had like a Gene Simmons profile picture. I remember I had my middle school girlfriend.
Gross.
Yeah, it was gross because like people were into like doing like the top 5, your top 5, and you put your significant other in the thing, whatever that means when you're in middle school. But it's like, here's all of these like very proper like cutesy images of all these people, and then at the top, just because they felt like they had to, Gene Simmons right there at the fucking booth. Like, what? Who is that? But yes, I had one.
I was imagining the other, like your profile, and it was your girlfriend is number 1, and then it's like Peter Criss is number 2, and Paul Stanley is number 3.
Nobody likes Peter Criss.
I stole an image from Google, and Gene Simmons with his eyes rolled back in his head, and the
I fucking knew it.
That was my profile picture.
This is why Austin didn't like Job for a Cowboy at the time, by the way, is because he fucking listened to Iron Maiden and Kiss.
I mean, I get it.
At the same time.
God, he's 5 years younger than us.
What year were you born in?
90.
89.
So yeah, 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, I had one. I wasn't like really into underground music, so I wasn't utilizing it for the same reasons you guys were. But I had one, and I had like I probably wouldn't be getting into newer music till like probably high school.
Right. I mean, I know I found a shitload of bands just through MySpace, because I would find the band I was into, look at their top, go from there. It just devolved, right? Until by the end of it, you're listening to like Gore Grind, and you're going, what the fuck have I done?
Oh my God.
With myself. Yeah. Like, you're like, I never want to enter this world ever again. And then you have bands like Infant Annihilator now, which is, I don't want to get into that. But they put their demo. They record a demo. It's 3 songs. They put it out of MySpace. They use the tool, and people started to notice. The guys are 14, 15, 16 years old. Can't really play a shitload of shows. They can play here and there. They're still in high school, by the way, putting all of this effort into this, and people started to notice. The demo I've heard is great. It's a lot more in the vein of metalcore. There's no clean vocals on it. But it's still pretty aggressive shit at this point, pretty advanced for a bunch of young kids like recording this type of stuff. But it definitely fits in with that era of like metalcore for sure. It's very, the recording is very tinny sounding.
I mean, like you said, for not having maybe much of a scene in your own hometown for the sort of style of music, the fact that you're just like kind of in the right place or like at the cusp of something, about to explode, and you're, on the computers or hard drives of like people all around the world is pretty fucking crazy, especially for that age. So
this was during the time of MP3 players and the first couple of iPods had been released. And I mean, this stuff, everybody was plugging something into their computer to upload music at that point. It was a lot different then than it is now, where, I mean, we all do it. You know, you can find a new track and you're listening to it in 10 minutes or less than that at this point. I mean, this was still a period of time where you had to hunt, you had to find stuff. And I know there's an aspect of that that still lives for sure. I don't want to sound like the old man screaming at the cloud, but there's something about that time period when it came to finding music. And I'm sure Swindle can attest to this as well, that you stick with those bands that you found during that period a lot. Like, you know, Swindle's mentioned it in a few of the episodes we've done where it's like, oh, I found it in a blog spot, or I found it in there. And like, you stick with those, the bands that you had to dig through the trenches and find all this stuff, Dragula, and you had to like find all this stuff for, is just, you stick with them. And that's probably why this band still carries so much heft with me. But we get, you get through all that, the demo's out, you write a little bit more, you release what is arguably the band's kind of legendary album, EP, whatever you want to call it, the Doom EP. It's got the tracks that you know on it. It's got Knee Deep. It's got Entombment of a Machine on it. It's got is this the creation of deathcore? Absolutely not. But it's one of the first big things that genre is kind of known for. I mean, you had bands around this time that were forming in different areas of the country. I mean, just in my back door and Swindle's back door, you had Whitechapel in Knoxville, Tennessee, kind of forming around the 06 area. You had Suicide Silence and I think the kind of Bay Area of California. You had like Impending Doom and all sorts of other bands that were coming about. And then you had like metalcore bands that were really big that were getting more aggressive. Arguably, the Acacia Strain was a really heavy one at this point in time. Bands like Bleeding Through were having blast beats and guttural vocals to it. And a ton of bands that I'm not mentioning. Animosity in particular. You know, look at those guys. They'd been around for a lot longer than this band. So you had a lot of youthful bands that were coming out, adding elements of death metal, hardcore, and metalcore all together to create this amalgamation of these wonderful things. You're welcome. And then you get this thing that kind of takes the underground and youth culture by storm. I mean, I didn't have a physical copy of this, but I wore these fucking tracks out on my iPod every single morning, every single day, riding the bus, walking home, whatever it was. I listened to this shit nonstop. Sometimes in class, like just popped it in, you know, and just listened to it. The production on this thing sounds really good for the time that it came out. There's some weird kind of industrial sounds to it as well before a couple drum things kick in. It's wild sounding. Obviously the vocals are a standout here, right? You know, Johnny's doing some pretty interesting shit here that wasn't really known at the time. I mean, if your ear wasn't to the underground and you weren't into extreme metal music or extreme music, you probably weren't going to hear anything like this. So this was probably a gateway record for a lot of people at that point in time. Is it the band's only deathcore release? Kind of, for sure. You know, it's the band's only deathcore release for sure with breakdowns that I attest. I mean, they're young guys. Again, they're 16, 17 years old. They're going to play what they like. And luckily with this, the band got to take a couple more steps further into the world of playing more shows and getting more attention. I mean, there's great footage of the band during this time of playing these VFW hall shows in California to like people are crawling up the fucking walls and all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's pretty wild to see it. I think Johnny had the swoop hair at that time, which a lot of my friends did, and I've seen it. But a wild time for this young band, you know, in high school, not really able to do much other than go to high school and play shows on the weekend. And this band definitely put a lot of time and effort into this project for sure. They weren't cutting corners. They weren't, they weren't half-assing it by any means, and it paid off. But with all of this, they were able to do some touring at this point in time. West Coast stuff, East Coast stuff. I know on the West Coast end of it, they were able to play a couple dates on the Sounds of the Underground tour That might have been the second year for that tour. And through this, they were able to obtain management, which helped them sink the deal with Metal Blade Records at the end of 2006. But with all of that, you have a bit of a lineup change with that. But I don't want to pass over the Metal Blade Records importance of this. I think every single one of us owns or has owned something from Metal Blade Records.
Yeah,
There's not a fucking doubt. That's
impossible.
Yeah. It's probably the most important, if not the most, one of the most important underground metal labels of all time. You and I have talked about the importance of Brian Slagel for years.
Sure.
There would be no Metallica essentially without Brian Slagel.
But, and then with that too, we have often mentioned that Brian Slagel is a good buddy. He's a good guy. And certainly I think people see that in him and the label. And, what we obviously have Cannibal sticking with the label through their entire career. This band essentially doing the same thing. Yeah. So, that's a testament to, I guess how that band operates and, their relationships with their artists that they work with.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we had a few lineup changes. I know Andy and Chad were only featured on the demo from what I saw.
Correct.
With this, after the release of the Doom EP, we also lose Andrew. Not
Correct.
sure if he left on his own terms or if he was asked to leave.
There seems to be a little bit of there seems to be some mystery around that, whether he was asked to leave or he left. But it definitely comes down to the guys just didn't mesh with him. Seems like whatever. There you go. It's pretty straightforward with that. But they had a friend. They had a buddy, in which I think a lot of bands have done this. Like, oh, he can hang with us. Let's just get him. Enter Bobby Thompson, who was with the band for a pretty good period of time.
It's all about being a good hang.
That's it. being a good hand. Be the Owen Hart. Be a good hand. And enter Bobby Thompson joining the band. Bobby joined in May of 2006, so he helped write a good portion of the album we're talking about today, Genesis. And Bobby's influences are a little bit more death metal centric, of course. You've got like Decapitated, Hate Eternal, even some like kind of maybe not death metal influences, but some just rock and roll influences, heavier music. So like the guys listen to Mastodon as well. So there's a little bit more of a difference in this, because what I gathered from these guys is they basically put their heads down and just said, what can we listen to and help us sound different from Doom to Genesis? Let's listen to the most extreme death metal we can. And sometimes if you end up listening to one form of music the entire time, you're only going to sound like that. So you have to be able to add some textural difference, some tonal differences and everything. And I think having a guy like Bobby has helped that out. And if you look at the band's, the rest of the band's output and catalog that has had Bobby involved, you can hear what his playing has done for those later records as well. But let's dig right into this. Genesis, the debut full length from Job for a Cowboy, released on May 17th, 2007. I was a first day fucking buyer for this thing. It is, I guess it is the highest, or it's the highest debuting record from a heavy metal act since Slipknot's debut in 1999. And that says a lot. That's not to say it sold more than the Slipknot record. I would actually be interested to find those numbers out too. But this thing, with just MySpace, with MySpace and the world we were living at the time and younger people still buying, CDs and whatnot, debuted at number 54.
Yeah. From the information I found, it sold nearly 13,000 copies in its first week. So I don't know how that compares to probably astronomical numbers in comparison to that Slipknot self-titled, but still for the time and how different those records sound. It's, certainly heavier music was far more accepted by this point.
Absolutely.
So again, for a band to break and do it this early, that is such a crazy fact.
And Metal Blade did a really good job of pushing this. They had a younger band that they were all in on. The last band they had really done that with would have been the Black Dahlia Murder or like As I Lay Dying during this period of time. But they went all in. I saw adverts for this record everywhere. Revolver, Early Decibel, shit. I think I even saw it in like Outburn and Alternative Press and in different magazines here and there. And I mean, it was everywhere. And they were even pushing it, weirdly enough, as a progressive death metal record at that time, which now hearing it, I don't necessarily think that, but hearing it as a younger guy, it was, okay, this is definitely different. It sounds different. It seems like that progressive word might have been used just to, we don't know really how to describe this. Let's push it. But it seems like the band was also pretty stressed and strapped on the recording side for this album and the writing side. It seems like they really only gave themselves about a month's time to write 7 or 8 tracks for this, and they just fucking bulldozed through it. Hey, you've got riffs, I've got riffs, let's figure this out. So, like a lot of young kids and younger people, they procrastinated a little bit. And as a professional procrastinator, I understand. I get it. There's always something else that can be done, right? It's like, oh, I got this thing that I'm signed up for the next 10 years of my life that I have to do, and there's money involved. I got this the day before. Shit. And they did that. And luckily, Bobby and Ravi were able to write a little bit more cohesively together, and we got the record we're set off with. But not only was the writing a little bit difficult, but there's even some of the recording side of it that ended up being a little bit difficult. We ended up with another lineup change with this. You have drummer Elliot Sellers that did record the album, but he left prior to the finishing of the album. Like, he recorded all his drum parts and just wanted to go back to school. Wanted to tend to that and enter in the band's longest tenured drummer, really, which is John the Charn Rice, who has gone on to play with, I don't know where that nickname came from. I have no idea.
The Charn?
The Charn. No idea. It didn't appear till the second record.
Okay.
But someone's got to know.
Sure. I will say, John, obviously a very great drummer.
Yep.
I'm glad Elliot was able to record, I believe, the Doom EP
Can't wait to
and
talk
also
about
this. I think he is a very standout piece of this record. Obviously there's a lot going on, like riff wise and on all other aspects of this record. But a lot of the thing that I was noticing or picking up on was just like the drums are fucking killer. So for Elliot to be on arguably their most famous thing, the Doom EP and also this record, is
good on him.
Really great.
John's intro to the band was a little weird. The band wasn't done recording. They find John via a video on YouTube covering one of their older songs. They fly him out. He's not able to play with the band because the drum set is still in the studio. So he's just kind of waiting around for a little bit, hanging out. And by the time they're done in the studio, he had like a week, or he had a very short amount of time to get the songs down, and they ended up basically like doing a song a day, then having 2 practices, and then tour, heading into it. So, into the lion's den.
He could have stayed at home. They could have sent him demos of the song. He could have stayed at home and learned them, and then joined them after.
Nah, fuck that, dude.
He just wanted to be there with them.
Yeah. I mean, they flew him out. When we did our Goat Whore episode, they flew out their drummer for the Haunting Curse album, and he was good to go. I know the tracks, let's get in there.
Also a young guy, right?
Yeah, same age, around 17.
They were didn't they
Yeah.
I think when we talked to Sammy, they were staying at his house, his family house or some shit like that.
Yeah.
That was wild. Recording production, we're obviously talking about this. Course Spots, recording the album at Blue Light Audio Media in Phoenix. He also recorded and mixed the Doom EP. I couldn't find anything else that he really did as far as being in extreme music, but so you clearly like what happened with the Doom EP. Maybe we try to replicate some of that success on the full length. Makes sense.
Yeah, and maybe that is a Metal Blade kind of pushing as well. Like, hey, you guys are comfortable with him. Use him. He's local. We don't necessarily want to fly you out anywhere else yet. Let's see what we can get under you first. But they did definitely go all in with the mixing and mastering. This fucking Andy Sneap, who's done, God, he's got a laundry list of a repertoire. I mean, I'm not even going to dig into that. Like, look up Andy Sneap. He's currently playing stage left guitar with Judas Priest. Like, come on, the guy's got a catalog to him. I can't go without mentioning this because we mention him every other episode, but this is the only album mixed by Andy Sneap. The next album is done by who?
Douches. Alan Douches.
Alan Douches.
Yep. But it seems like there's some technicians that worked on this record, Marty Welker being one, which I don't have a whole lot of information on there with that end. But I'm assuming when it comes to technician, that may have had a little bit to do with maybe some of the processing and engineering more so with the record and some of the soundscapes that are on this thing. Artwork side, the band is pretty synonymous with that Ram's Head. That's their thing. Like, if you look on most of their artwork, t-shirt designs, it's there. It's all over it. The band's gotten away from it in later years, but it was all over those early albums, all the way up to Demonocracy in 2012. Like, it's there. And it's there in full force on this one. I mean, they definitely went with a really highly polished piece of art done by Dennis Sibigen.
Yeah, he's an artist from the Netherlands. He's also worked with bands like Aborted, All Shall Perish, Chimera, just a few to mention there. So it's a crazy piece of art. That's for sure.
It sure fucking is. I bought a shirt from that tour with the album art on it, and I lost it to a girl I was kind of seeing at the time, and I hate myself for it. I wish I had that shirt again. I love it because I love that artwork. It's just really, it's a really iconic piece of art.
Hey man, we all got one of those.
We've all done it. But
like that Ramones shirt.
Oh, I've looked for that thing so much for you. I've tried to find another one. I got that with my Hot Topic discount.
Right.
When I worked there. 40% off. 40% off.
Still had the steal.
But great artwork. The band's known for really cool artwork. Obviously, Moon Healer has some wild fucking art to it. Sun Eater, wild artwork. And the rest of the albums as well. But the Swindle, I kind of want you to dig into the concept on this album because it's real interesting.
Essentially, it's like this corporation is trying to get people to install a microchip in their body that like reads some medical information and other information, and it's like religious people's reaction to that, the idea of that, because like in the Bible, something.
The mark of the beast. Yeah.
The mark of the beast.
These like the Verichips. I don't remember hearing about this.
Heard about it with this album.
Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be like a medical thing for sure, like keep track of all your stuff, but you know, it's like religious people will find something about anything. Oh, I see him in the toast, and you know, oh, they're sticking stuff in your skin. That's like the mark of the beast, and it's like, you know, Book of Revelations, the Rapture. I remember I grew up in the church, Catholic church, and seeing like they, you know, like a literal child, and they hand you the book and you're reading through stuff, and you see like all of these like very old paintings depicting some of the things that are supposed to happen, like, you know, skeletons like slitting people's throats, and like I'm like, oh my god, yeah, this is crazy.
The thousand-eyed angels are what always do it for me.
Those are terrifying.
Leviathan, which is the seven-headed monster, or no, the dragon with the seven heads, and it's like, come on, like, God, but there's before Star Wars film and there's after Star Wars film. Like, come on.
You essentially have Johnny like taking these like two ideas, like, you know, he's like a very staunch like atheist.
Yep.
Or at least he was at the time. I don't know where his political or religious beliefs lie, but smashing them together. He dives into that whole world. It is kind of fascinating what people will come up with. So you just write a fucking record about it, I guess.
And he's kind of quoted as saying like, I don't know, it just seems like an invasion of privacy. It just seemed like the fucked up thing to write about. Like, all right. It's cool. I mean, it's death metal 101, like religion and politics to an extent. And this band got really political for a few years, like Ruination, Demonocracy, Gloom. Those are pretty political records. Like if you look at some of the lyrical ideas on that, Ruination in particular is extremely political. But yeah, so we've got the concept. We've talked about the production side of this, the artwork. Let's get into the meat and the potatoes, guys.
The riffs.
And
we talk about riffs here.
We talk about riffs. And this thing is a pretty abrasive opener.
It starts right out of the gate.
Yep.
The one thing I'll say about this record, like with the previous, release being rooted in deathcore, this is certainly like more straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I would be wrong to say that maybe like the biggest connection I could make to this record or comparison would be their label mates and Cannibal Corpse. I feel
100%.
like there is a lot of Cannibal, like Corpse Grinder era Cannibal, vocally as well, like a little dash of Corpse Grinder, little Carcass stuff with some of like those bear and snake parts, but lots of those Cannibal riffs on this album for sure.
So this track in particular, just the way it opens and how the lyrics are immediately hitting you in the face. Like it's a very well produced record, but it's still pretty straightforward. It's dry when it comes to the tracks. Like there's layers all over it, but this album, after listening to it for 16, 17 years, is very much it definitely feels like a band that really wanted to get away from sounding like they used to. There's things on here that I love, and I love this record. But there's definitely things on this record that are evident of, okay, the songs aren't quite ready. We're getting them. It definitely feels rushed, and that makes sense learning that they had to cram all this in about a month. But they definitely made a very, hard line in the sand with, we are not going to sound like we used to. We're going to push the death metal vein. And with a track like Burying the Serpent's Lamb, it's very clear. Like opening track is fucking wild. What I like about this too is it's fast. This is a slow record. This shit is top speed. The tracks are all most of them are under 3 minutes. Burying the Serpent's Lamb is opening riff is just fucking wild.
Yeah, it's a great track. I think you get everything that, as we often have covered on the show, like the first track is gonna kind of paint the whole picture for you. It's heavy. It's pretty technical. There's a lot going on for sure. Melodic, 100%. I love the kind of dichotomy between like the two guitar players on this record. I think it's a great opener. It's a great opening song to a record.
There were a couple of riffs that I thought were really cool, like 45 seconds in and like a minute in. There was a really cool spot where like all the music dropped out and there was a little bass solo transition into a different part. I like that a lot.
The bass isn't really present on the record, but it's there. Like you can kind of hear it in a couple parts. This is definitely a guitar forward record, guitars and drums. The guitars are just up front in the mix on this, really loud. That's kind of an Andy Sneap thing as well. But then you kick into Reduced to Mere Filth, which has I believe it kicks off with the drum fill.
It's one of the coolest things on the record, I think. Like Elliot doing this kind of like drum roll, double bass, and with like some of these cymbal accents.
The cymbals.
Yeah, the cymbals are rad. There are times too where, I'm listening to this album a couple times, and on the left ear in particular, there's like, you could hear some of the clanks of like a couple cymbal hits or whatever. Like just like, oh, that was a weird way that was mixed or something. But yeah, he's like cooking on the entire song in general, but that opener was like, whoa, what? That's awesome. Fuck yeah, Elliot. That's crazy.
That opening riff of this track alone is fucking bonkers, with the different harmonies that kind of are throughout, because the harmonies are a little bit more, they're not necessarily dissonant, but they're almost disharmonic in a way. It's on the more extreme version of harmony.
My favorite riff on this song in particular is the like kind of the hardcore riff at like 90 seconds in. I mean, it might be one of my favorites on the record, honestly, but
I have stolen so many riffs from this record. So many. There's a Divine Intervention song that I wrote that is literally.
That's funny. I don't know which one. Yeah. Is it this one?
I think it's this track. It's
That's
either
hilarious.
this track or Coalescing Prophecy. And I'll show you the riff the next time I see you and you'll go, oh yeah, absolutely.
I remember a few of them, but yeah, that's hilarious.
It's the big chord intro that I stole for sure.
That's funny.
And then you get into Altered from Catechization, which will not be able to say that twice. They did a live video. It's kind of live. It's kind of filtered in with some weird sepia tones.
There's like this track and then Embedded, I think, has one. They're basically just like the band playing.
Yeah.
Right. And with some imagery edited in.
Another rad track. It's a little bit longer of a track. Again, just riff soup, I think. With a lot of the tracks on this record, it does feel like a band that wanted to get breakdowns kind of out of their catalog, and they didn't really know just what they wanted to put in yet. So they're like, more riffs, just shove it all in there.
I will say, I think what this band does a really good job of, at least like on this record, and it's kind of like infancy of like this new direction. I think they do a very good job of like their tempo changes, their transitions to like some of those groovier parts. Like this song in particular definitely has some blistering tempos, and then it's like, oh, there's that groove, there's that really catchy hooky part. I mean, and what's great too, like even if they're fast as shit, or if they're kind of like bringing it down a little bit, it's like all melodic, all the same. Like all the parts are like very, they catch your ear, I would say. In particular, there's like one part that stuck out to me. I called it it's like halfway through the song, I called it like the bumblebee part, because it's like there's just the guitars are going fucking nuts, and like the drums are also like it sounds like a fucking bee in a fucking jar just going ape shit. Like
just like that, Dylan. You nailed it.
Yep.
Another track that I really enjoyed Elliot's performance on, he has like a quick little kind of drum solo part.
Solo.
But one of the other parts that kind of stood out to me, I don't know if you guys got the same thing or if, like, you had the same interpretation of it, but like at the end, there's the outro riff. He's kind of doing a few different beats, and one of them sounded like a fucking disco beat to me.
Didn't catch that.
There's a little bit of a kind of like botting kind of thing that I was like, oh, this man knows. He likes to get it down.
Fucks.
This man fucks. Yes.
He fucks.
But with this album, as I mentioned with Doom, you had a couple kind of soundscapes on that record. You got a couple tracks that hit that in particular on this album. They're there. I don't hate them.
I wrote that this song is hearing music from the early 2000s Vampire Club through the door.
I put
Code Orange.
Cut that out. Canceled.
Batman Begins rock. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Also, I did on the later one, I did write Gargoyles themed synth. I do like these though, personally. I wrote this one was like kind of like an atmospheric T2 instrumental.
Yeah.
Synth. There's some kind of industrial sounding influences. There's also like some of these layers with the guitar just going kind of crazy. Choir vocals, some other noises.
Yeah.
It's cool. Maybe does it need to be there?
Very Symphony of Destruction-esque.
Yeah.
At the very end, it sounds like the fucking dive bomb from This Love by Pantera.
God, that's probably not too far off, honestly. These guys were like, yeah. I mean, they're fucking 19, 20 years old at this point.
Yeah.
Like, just do what feels right.
I don't think there's very much else on this album that sounds like Pantera.
No. I mean, I definitely hear, like, when I first listened to this record, I was like, this is Hate Eternal. Like, this is what it sounds like. That intensity, that speed, that aggression.
Those kind of like, I don't want to say like transition bands, like the from the old school to this kind of era. There's like those bands in between. I think you kind of mentioned in like a review or like another thing that you were talking about, like I don't want to say even second wave. I don't know exactly when those, but like the late 90s, maybe early 2000s kind of shit. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. We get to the first single from the record, Embedded, which again starts out maniacally.
Yeah, you go from like an instrumental right back into the fucking fire, basically. Like you just hitting the chops.
I don't know if it's the first riff or the second riff in the song, but it is kind of like syncopated, and there's like a very short pause in the second time through the riff, and then they like fucking blast back into the riff.
Yes.
I love that like half a beat pause.
Seeing this track live was pretty nuts. Just because it's like, oh, this is how I want this band to sound, and I get to hear this like as a machine blowing through, like fuck. And knowing these guys are young too was really cool. Embedded, first major music video, like first music video with a pretty big budget. Again, it was directed. I didn't realize this was directed by a Grammy nominated director.
Yeah, I couldn't find much on it. If anybody knows, they could comment below. But what was it called? It's like Popcorn
Films.
So I'll have
don't
to
they
look
do 2D
AI.
movies now?
AI director.
AI director. The actual movie Artificial Intelligence with Jude Law?
No. It's like people are like, this one person I follow on Instagram was like, yeah, there's AI books on Amazon now, and if you like search for the author's books, literally nothing will show up.
Damn.
I hate that.
That's how you know that it's like AI.
That's buck wild.
So it just reminded me of that.
The fucking it's funny to see music videos that at the time when they came out, they were probably like very crisp looking at, it's
when
like
they
when
haven't
you play
done a remaster.
Well, like, yeah, they haven't, done anything to the thing
Yeah.
in like, fucking over 10 years, basically.
It sounds awful.
Yeah, it's
you
terrible.
Go to YouTube right now, and it's like the most like pixelated fucking piece of shit that you've ever seen.
It sounds like you're listening to it through a pillow, like in between between your headphones and your ears.
But
is
at the
a pillow.
time, if you saw this on TV or whatever, I'm
Yep.
sure it looked great. But yeah, like 10 plus years ago on fucking.
If you were listening to it through your MacBook speakers in 2008.
Oof. Beautiful.
Great, a great track, standout track on the record. I think. I do feel like the record is front heavy. I think the record is front loaded for sure. I think the band was very conscious of, okay, let's load these up at the front. Let's do this. Most of the band's live output was most of that early part of this record when I saw them. Tracks like Strings of Hypocrisy, Martyrdom, Unsealed, great tracks.
Strings of Hypocrisy was actually my favorite song.
Really?
I actually wrote that as well. I think it's one of my
Is
favorite.
that the track with the Morbid Angel kind of bridge?
It's pretty. It doesn't really deviate much in tempo. I don't think it's pretty driving like throughout. But I will say it has like one of my favorite riffs, one of my like favorite like kind of melodic
Hell yeah
arrangements on it. Mainly because parts of it or like variations of it are like almost kind of like they have like a rubber band quality to it. Like it almost kind of like slings back in a way. I'm not sure if that's like what you were picking up on, Swindle, but I would agree. I think this is one of my favorite songs on the record.
I am not the biggest connoisseur of death metal, and a lot of the riffs on this record are, to me, very kind of death metal 101 riffs. Like, this is what death metal sounds like. There were like 3 riffs in a row on Strings of Hypocrisy that I was like, that's a weird fucking riff. I really like that. And then like the next riff hit and it was like, that's fucking weird too. I love that riff. Yeah. And then there like a third riff happened. And I was like, that's really fucking cool too. So that was like my favorite track on the whole album.
This also too, like, I think I noticed it on Embedded and I noticed it in parts here where like you can kind of audibly hear the bass, like especially on Strings of Hypocrisy. It's like, I think it's mainly just kind of playing along to what the guitars are, just to kind of hold down the fort, but you can actually hear it and it sounds pretty damn good.
It's with the 2 tracks, like with these 2 tracks in particular, Strings of Hypocrisy and Martyrdom Unsealed, coming after the single coming after such a very strong track. You know, things get buried, right? Again, I love everything about this record. Do I have objections to it years later? Absolutely. Absolutely. As I do with many of the other albums I really was fond of and still am. You get to the next kind of industrial sounding track, or the segue track, which is Blasphemy.
It's fun. It's like, okay, do these
fits
need to
in
be
the
there?
record.
Yeah. Do they need to be there? Maybe
Right.
not. I don't know. I think it adds like a fun kind of quality, like maybe even just like hey, we thought this was really cool at the time. And, it's like chains and bones rattling almost to me.
So
it feels like it matches what the idea of the record is, right?
Yes.
Like a post-apocalyptic kind of like, all right, the Antichrist is like come back and like fucking decimated,
thinking about it, the band was kind of quoted as saying like, oh yeah, Corey added the new metal soundscapes to it. Like when they're talking, they're like, oh yeah, he added the new metal sounds to it. It's like, okay,
sure.
Kind of sure. But I mean, when the rest of the record sounds like a mixture of like Nile, Decapitated, Hate Eternal, all these aggressive, heavy bands, like, okay.
I mean, but we
sure.
also get stuff like this on like fucking Cattle Decapitation records.
Oh, yeah.
I think they fit but much better on those records personally, but I don't think it's like totally outlandish.
No, it's not
like,
foreign.
Yeah, no.
I think these are very non-offensive ways to break up this record.
What a very diplomatic.
I mean, it's
like, it's not. I wouldn't say it's art. It's not like, it doesn't make you think.
It's
about
not a
it.
bunch of door stops being thumped.
Yeah, we should get that door.
And when I say that, I don't mean I don't think the record is art. I don't think these two like songs are like artful expressions of whatever they're feeling, but it's a way to break up this very aggressive, very fast album. And it's like, it's not annoying at all.
No.
And it's definitely not so annoying that I had to be like, fuck this. I'm tired of this.
It's a very
fucking Vampire Club song. I skipped to the next one.
If you didn't have these tracks on there, I think the listener would get exhausted, because this is intense. It's heavy. It doesn't let up. There's really no room for breathing. It's moving straight forward. It's fast. Also, I meant to mention this earlier about the kind of the rubber band thing. They're tuned low as shit. They're in like B flat or something like that on just standard scale, standard 6-string, 4-string bass, that kind of thing.
I do also think that this sets a good tone for like a little bit of a tone change in the next song.
Absolutely.
Because
it is like the first time you really get some breather. Yeah. It's heavy.
Absolutely.
But the riffs are like, they're slower, they're dirgier. It's like a big, again, to put like a post-apocalypse. Yeah.
Yep. It's like a Doom track.
Yeah. There's some world-ending riffs.
Yep.
Like, honestly.
So, funny enough, you mentioned that the last two tracks are supposed to basically be, the concept for the last two tracks is the end of the world.
Yeah. Which makes total sense.
It sounds like that.
Very thematic.
And the Divine Falsehood makes me think of like Incantation, some of the kind of harmonic minor scale choices in like a Nile record of this time, very much sounding like their influences, but also sounding like this band. This band kind of found its pocket and went, okay, this is what we want to sound like on this record. And they did a really good job of that. I haven't brought this up yet, and I should have, which is Johnny's vocals.
Yeah. They're great.
That guy, I didn't really start making the Corpse Grinder comparisons till much later on. I went, okay, I get it. He's enunciating. You can understand. You can follow him. But he has his own character to his voice. It's almost like you can hear his tongue curling or something like that, like bending.
Dude, think of like the latest record even.
Oh, my God.
Like there were totally moments on that thing where it's like, it would be difficult for anyone to like lay some of those vocal parts down.
Yeah.
And, he's been doing it a long time. And well, I mean, he kind of, I'm not, maybe you can fill me in on this, but like, I mean, to have stepped away, for this band to not have done anything for an extended period of time.
Like he's been doing it.
It sounds like he got better to me, honestly,
He's got a character to his voice that's hard to match. I've never heard anybody that has sounded close to him. There are a lot of modern vocalists that not only not only owe credit to Travis from Cattle Decapitation, but I think owe this guy some credit too. You're not going to have your bands like Lorna Shore that are going to have that type of tonality with what they're doing without bands like this. You know, '07 had some great records that came out that had all these vocalists with these great character takes to them. You had Behemoth, the Apostasy, and Nurgle sounds like he does. And
Bless you.
I hate you. You have Clients by the Red Chord, which Guy has a very definable, like, hardcore meets death metal voice. Also, wanted to bring this up. Should have brought it up earlier. Johnny did guest vocals on a song called Dread Prevailed on that record before this album came out. Another Metal Blade release. You had Nocturnal by the Black Dahlia Murder. R.I.P. Trevor. And then you had this record. Like, all very characteristic, all very proficient vocalists with their own characters to their voice. Like, Nurgle's very commanding. Trevor's got, like, I read a review one time that considered his voice, his high screams were guinea pig and a microwave vocals, and that's stuck with me since then.
God.
And Guy sounds like a hardcore vocalist to an extent, so it's perfect. Like, all these different vocalists, and you know, that's a big focal point on this record to me. But the Divine Falsehood, I pinned that as the track that you guys would like the most. I was like, oh yeah, this is the Doom track.
One of my favorites. It's one of my favorites. Yeah,
the drums.
I think
I want to say, my biggest complaint about the sound of the drums is the last song. There's like one blast in particular where I was like, I'm sure it is a trigger. Just the sound that they use for the snare sounded so bad, like so digital, so like if you hit a snare on like one of the cheapest electronic drum sets that you could find at Guitar Center, that's what the snare sounded like to me. But on the last listen of the album, I also noticed the snare song on the Divine Falsehood, and I was like, why didn't they just use a regular untriggered snare for this song? Because it's slow, there's no like real blasts, and the song is so big, and you kind of like, I feel like it would have made the drums sound better to have like a big room sound or a lot of reverb or whatever, since the song sounds so big in general.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
I usually don't. It's weird that I like thought that, because I don't normally have opinions about stuff like that, like how the drums sound.
Right.
Yeah.
Like really, most of the time I don't care.
And maybe that attributes to the band being, one, so young, obviously really tight with getting in the studio and how quickly they wrote stuff. It's Elliot's last album with the band. He's like, as long as I get this done really well, we're good. It sounds good. Corey, you recorded this last time. It sounds great. You know, let's just use the same drum tone I had on the EP. Great, cool. This is my live drum sound. I mean, there's points on the record that, and you guys might have heard it, there's a point, and I can't remember which track it is, where the double kick is in, and you hear a lag in some of the kick. It's lighter. Like, it's lighter. It's not as intense. And like, when you're playing this way, I'm sure like shit happens. The human body can only do so much. And it's not a gripe. It adds a bit of a charm to this record for me when I do hear things that maybe aren't pristine. You know, some of the guitar things on this, because they're tuned so low, like I can hear the notes being bent out of tune. And like, it adds a character to it, adds a sludgy almost character to this. My favorite track on the record is Coalescing Prophecy. I love it. What a fucking way to end the album on.
I think it's one of the most intense parts of the record, honestly. You might as well.
So that opening, da 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 da. Yeah, that's in a lot of my playing, 100%. But that layered scream, how he does the high, my God.
Yeah, I think that was the standout part of this song. Ooh. I think this was a good way to end the record, for sure.
And it's definitely more of that low kind of gurgle vocal that he's got, a lot closer to maybe what the Doom style was. because it's all in that very like kind of grunty area when it comes to his vocals. And I mean, what a great way to end the record out on. It's a 30-minute record.
Yep.
If you
It
pull,
just stops.
yeah, it's done. I mean, if you pulled out the two kind of like segue tracks in there, like it's what, 27 minutes long, maybe?
Sure.
I mean, when I heard this, I don't want to get emotional about it, but the pure intensity of this between like this album and Kill being like 35 minutes long, it was like, Jesus Christ, you can fit that many things in a record that short.
With that said, with our record, we mentioned that it obviously did very well. Debuted number 54 in the Billboard 200. Highest selling debut by a heavy band since Slipknot's debut. 13,000 copies in its first week. So we've also kind of mentioned a little bit of touring because I'm sure this will come up for you as well. But prior to the album's release, they were touring quite a bit here. January to February, they were on tour with Psyopus and See You Next Tuesday. February to mid-March, they were on tour with Despised Icon, which you mentioned. Late March, On Earth, Despised Icon in the UK. Mid-April, Darkest Hour, they did like a little mini tour. Late April into early May. Guess what? Hey, they're on tour with Cannibal Corpse and the Red Chord for like a little bit of a spring tour.
Would have been something to see.
Yeah, dude, that would have been right up your fucking alley.
Yeah. I mean, 3 bands that were at that time defining bands for Metal Blade Records. If you'd thrown like the Black Dahlia Murder on there during this period, it would have been over.
Yeah. So out of all of these, so when did you actually see this? Did you see this band on this touring cycle?
I saw them on the album cycle, but it was after the album was released.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So they did they actually got to be on the Sounds of the Underground for 07 that year, which had bands such as Guar, Chimera, Every Time I Die, etc., etc. I got to see them in their kind of mid to late August tour cycle, which was a headliner for them, which was Job for a Cowboy, Despised Icon, A Life Once Lost, The Faceless, and like one of the early Bring Me the Horizon tours, which is fucking wild. So all of these bands had released pretty classic records to each of them at that point. A Life Once Lost had Iron Gag, which is a rad record. Ills of Modern Man from Despised Icon, that's kind of their standout record. The Faceless with their debut, Akeldama. Bring Me the Horizon with their Pray for Plagues album. I saw them in a venue in Little Rock, Arkansas called Vino's Brew Pub that is still around. It's a great pizza and brew pub place. Awesome.
Take the family.
Take
try
the family.
the beer nuggets.
Get the pretzel bites. That beer cheese is stellar. But it was on August 23rd, 2007. So I had just started my junior year in high school as this like was taking place. A few of my friends and I, we got there. The venue's really tiny. And we're like the band's just like wandering around and we're talking to them and like, hey man, it's good to see you. Like, can't wait to see you guys. I think Bring Me the Horizon was sound checking or something. And John, the drummer, was like warming up on his pad and I audibly heard him go, I fucking hate this band. I just heard it audibly. And then he starts talking to me about it. It's like, God damn, this is too good. Because a couple of my buddies were a really big fan of that first Bring Me the Horizon record. And since then, I have not liked that band. And I went, if the dudes in Job for a Cowboy don't like this band, there's got to be a reason. And
if they hadn't outed themselves as hating Bring Me the Horizon, Dylan just fucking did. You heard it here. Tell your friends.
Hey man, John has had a successful career. He's went on to play with Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats. He's doing touring with Behemoth off and on.
Sure.
He's in Umbra Vitae. I believe he was in Wear Your Wounds. Like, I think he's doing just fine, even though he hates those British guys.
I don't know much about Bring Me to the Horizon, but I do remember them playing a few arenas during my high school years or whatever.
They still play arenas.
They did fine.
I think they're doing just fine.
They're okay. I don't think they mind too much.
And it wasn't just him. There were other members of that band that were audibly talking shit, and it was great to see that. So hold on. I have another tidbit about that show. Life Once Lost played a great set. I bought a shirt. I'm a moron. Great shirt, A Life Once Lost. I wear it to school. There's a teacher just eyeballing me. She goes, "Do you know what's on your shirt?" I go, "It's this." She goes, "That's a bong, Dylan." And I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror, and the tour was called the Riffs and Spliffs tour.
Oh, man.
And it's a bong. It's a hand holding the earth with a carb in the top of it.
Went right past you.
It was cool. Like I gave Summer that shirt years later.
Damn, shut up,
and
Summer.
like, I hope they still have it. If not, I get it. One of those shirts I wish I would have held on to. Despised Icon was great on that show too. But I saw them at Tour Cycle. It was great. I got to see them again, I guess, on the Genesis Tour Cycle, but it was an off date from Gigantour.
Oh, wow.
It was In Flames headlining and Job For A Cowboy direct support. So they were playing like their arena sets at that point.
After this, they get to go to Australia, I would assume, for the first time. Very, very cool through mid-September. They kind of end out the year mid-October, mid-November with the Radio Rebellion tour, featuring Behemoth as a co-headliner and support from Gojira and Beneath the Massacre.
Think about that.
Yeah, that's fucking Grammy nominated, Grammy winning, maybe even.
They didn't.
No,
in
but
US
they're
they didn't.
nominated.
Yeah.
Open the fucking Olympics.
Yeah.
Like crazy.
I mean, it's fucking wild to see like how different the musical landscape is. But all of this to say, not a bad debut from a band that was only around 4 years at this point in time.
Yeah, I think really to kind of sum up my thoughts on it, without having like too much of a relationship with it. Obviously, we interviewed Nick, and I thought that was great. I really love the new record. I think it's fantastic. I would say that this is like definitely strong in a lot of aspects. I think you can tell it's a young band trying to head in a different direction. We kind of mentioned without the kind of intermission tracks or the instrumentals that kind of break it up, it would probably be a detriment to the record. And I still do think that there are parts of the record that kind of maybe bleed into each other. Like it's
100%.
It's
a very similar sounding record.
Yeah, it's pretty consistent. But all that to say, this band has just gotten better over time.
Oh my
with
God.
different records. So
just to kind of piggyback off that, the album that came after this, which is 2009's Ruination, is just from the opening notes is so much more advanced than this record. Obviously, you had another member change. You had founding member Ravi that had left the band to go back to school to become a dentist, which he is at this point in time. But you also had Al Glassman of Despised Icon, Goratory fame, and he's in another project called Serpent and Noose with Johnny. That's like a tech grind band from a few years ago. That's wild. And Al is a stellar guitar player. Has a right hand that is unbridled. But like that album is so fucking wild. There's the first riff of the first song is a 9/8, then it kicks to 11/8, then it's like they went full tech with that. They also tuned the guitars a little bit higher, so the notes poke out a little bit more. And it got more refined, it got more technical. It's the Charn's first record with the band. I mean, the band just got better and better and better with every release. And now we get this band that's kind of pseudo legendary at this point with, oh, wow, they haven't released something in 10 years. Like, what the fuck are we getting? And you get these kind of prog tech opuses that they're releasing now. It's a band that got a lot of shit for basically using the internet to help further their career and become a band and be able to tour, which is what a lot of bands do now. That's kind of the norm now. We don't think anything of it. Like, yeah, touring and shows are still one of the most important things out there, but there's so many bands that'll go, hey, we recorded an EP, you've never heard of us. Bam. We recorded a 7-inch, you've never heard of us. Bam. It's out there. This band just doing the research for this episode, there were so many questions about MySpace. It was fucking infuriating. And I'm sure that band was like, just drop it. Even now, they still get questions about it. And the press cycle for Moonhealer, they were still getting it. They were still getting it.
He said it, I think.
I mean, it's baffling to know that band was still dealing with it, but the band has gotten better. My views on this record are, I love this record. it hit at a time that I needed it. I needed that intensity. I needed something to kind of put a fire into my ass about being young and learning how to play my music or learning how to play my instrument that much better. And there are things on this record I can definitely say. I still categorize this as more deathcore or death metal centric deathcore. It's still getting away from it. They were learning transitionally to get away from it. My friend Will described this band in a manner that I've never thought about it. He goes, if you put Doom and Genesis together, that's one era. And then you put Ruination, Demonocracy, and the Gloom EP together, that's a different era. And then you get Sun Eater and Moon Healer as being an era. It's almost like you get to see this band grow. I mean, these guys aren't even 40 yet. I think Nick might be a little bit older than the rest of the band. But these guys aren't 40 yet. You know, hopefully we don't have to wait another 10 years for a new record. There are things on here that, like, yeah, I would go, okay, that seems like a very youthful thing with maybe some of the, maybe the overabundance of riffs in certain tracks and how often they're played, but I don't hate it by any means. I love it. It's a blistering listen. It's intense. I got nothing negative to say about it. I love this record. And now's the time of the episode where we talk about what we've been listening to for the last good bit of time. I have one this week. It is the band Gigan, who I had a chance to see with Cattle Decapitation many years ago. Going to talk about their upcoming release on Willowtip Records, which will be out October 25th. So by the time this episode airs, not terribly long. The album is called Anomalous, Abstractigate, Infinitessimus. Infinitessimus.
Bless you.
Infinitessimus. Whatever it is, it's on there. It's big words. And their second release single from this, Transdimensional Crossing of the Alta Tenuous. Yeah, fuck.
Unobtainium.
You chose to do this.
It's because it's rad. This shit is spacey. This shit is bonkers. It's freaky. There's different instrumentations all over this thing. I mean, my God, there's theremin, there's synthesizers, I think there's fucking cowbell on some of this stuff. It's wild technical death metal. This band is great. Check them out. If you like freaky, weird shit, you're going to like this a lot.
I also have one. This is a like an EP that got sent to me. I think it was also featured on the Decibel website recently, but Philly-based kind of hardcore death metal thrashy band by the name of No Gods. Their new EP, Counterfeit, Noose Wound, was released at the time of recording this episode, late September. It is available through Heavy and Fast Records. This is a band that I think started back in like 2016 under a different name. But I think this EP, these couple tracks kind of mark a new direction for the band. It has like some new members in it. Great couple songs. I enjoyed it over some coffee the other day. It's got some great riffs on it. So check it out. No Gods. Great shit.
My one rec is Nightmare City by The Uniform. It is essentially American Standard, but with all of the rock instruments removed. So the guitars, the drums, most of the vocals are removed from the album, and it kind of sounds soundscapey a little bit. The first song, American Standard, the song to me sounds like Goblin, like once, like on this version of the song, and I'll probably like add it to my reading playlist or something. Yeah, they initially it was supposed to just be a cassette that came along with the album, but I guess the people were just clamoring for it, so they put it on streaming. Sacred Bones did.
Nice.
So yeah, stream it.
Tight. Well, that's what we've been listening to this week. Check it out. Check out Job for a Cowboy catalog. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. You can follow us for any updates on this show at Riff Worship Pod, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Reviews from the Dillbozer's Den. Got some releases that have come out within the past few weeks, few months. Shit that, we try to keep up to date with. Dill just talking about what he feels about records from that big old ball dome of his. Lots of good ideas, lots of good opinions on records. We also have official playlist that you can find below in the description. Hits from the Crypt, Apple Music, Riffs on repeat, Spotify. No matter where you stream music, you can definitely keep up to date with what we're listening to. We update it pretty darn regularly. If you want to reach out to us for any reason, riffworshippod@gmail.com. But for myself, for Dylan, for Swindle, you've been listening to Riff Worship. We'll be back next week. Bye.